What's going on, guys? This is live stream number 25, and we're going to be talking about Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. I appreciate everybody joining on tonight. We got a special panel to put together, and I know this conversation is long overdue, but we wanted to see how this all unfolded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn, introduce our guest tonight for our panel, and then I'm going to give everybody about 2 minutes or so going around the horn to say their introduction, kind of like their monologue here before we open up the floor to the panel to discuss the current events. So first and foremost, we got Michael, and Michael is an old coworker of mine. He served in the Marine Corps Reserve 6 years, and he brings a different perspective to this panel. So we're glad to have him on tonight, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we got Chad. Chad's a good buddy of mine. We served together in Bravo 123. Went to Afghanistan with each other in Helmand Province back in 2012 timeframe. Chad's a veteran of OIF 1 and OIF 2 and fought in the Battle of Fallujah. He's studying for his military doctorate degree and always brings a interesting and highly educated perspective to the group. Welcome aboard tonight, brother.
Appreciate it.
All right, next we got Bruce at Camp Armament. No stranger to this YouTube channel. You guys should know who he is. He always brings a lively discussion when we talk Ukraine. So I'm sure he's got plenty to say tonight. And Bruce is a aircraft mechanic, former aircraft mechanic, I should say. He's an armorer. He's got his own YouTube channel called Bruce at Camp Armament. It's also his Instagram handle. And he's been to many tactical schools, but what he brings most to this panel is his civilian perspective. So, Bruce, glad to have you on tonight. All right, next, we got Les. Les at Pegasus Test. That is his YouTube name. Be sure to check him out. He's a Marine that served in the early 90s. He's a Gulf War veteran. He has his own logistics company. He also has his own tactical training company called Polaris Tactical and Simulations Division. Did I get that right this time?
You got it right, Brett.
So always a wealth of knowledge. Glad to have you on tonight, brother.
Outstanding. Glad to be here.
All right. Last but not least, we got the good doc, Dr. Christopher Larson. He also has his own YouTube channel called An Original Christopher Larson. Make sure you check it out. Doc is the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. He's an accomplished author. He's written many books on small unit tactics. He's a U.S. Army veteran, served in Korea, and just an unbelievable wealth of knowledge. Thanks for coming on tonight, Doc.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
All right, guys, that is our panel. What I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to go around the horn, okay? Everybody's going to have like a couple minutes, kind of a monologue just to say your piece. So we'll start off with Michael, since he's kind of a newcomer tonight. Go ahead, brother. You got the con.
Thank you, sir. I'll just be short and sweet. Unfortunately, this crisis has unfolded. But what I will say is that I am optimistic in terms of just the unified response by the EU, the United States, and other countries outside the European Union. And we all seem to be in lockstep in terms of responding quickly to the Russian government and Putin. So just very interested to hear what everyone has to say and kind of get their thoughts and go from there. Thank you.
I want to start off with something a little off topic, and then I'll go back on topic. But gentlemen, first and foremost, I want to point out the motto of Virginia is Sic Semper Tyrannis, which is often cited as meaning death to tyrants. Actually, the literal translation is thus always to tyrants, which means bad things will happen to tyrants eventually. So in that spirit, I want to say, fuck Trudeau. As far as Ukraine goes, strategically, Russia seems to be focused on the cities and ignoring the small towns and rural areas. They're kind of sticking to the roads. It's very reminiscent of the 2003 Iraq invasion. They haven't gained air superiority. They haven't taken any major cities. I think Putin has stirred up a hornet's nest. So we'll get to this discussion here shortly. And again, I'm like Michael. I'm interested in hearing everybody's point of view.
All right, gentlemen. Yeah, I'm too interested in hearing everyone's point of view, particularly our Russian supporters and those in chat from Russia. I did a little research for you guys today because I need your help. I know that all along you guys have said that this is just a training exercise that happens every year, and that there won't be any shots fired over it, and Russia would never invade Ukraine. So if you could send an email out to our buddy Vladimir Putin and let him know, it seems like he might have been left out of that group. His email address is vladimir.putin@rus.gov.
Wow, that's a hard one to follow. So on last week's live stream, when we were talking about Ukraine, I said, well, not much is happening. Well, 24 hours later, all kinds of crap happened. But this has been an interesting outcome so far. Clearly, as Chad had mentioned, the Russian Air Force has not established air superiority. It turns out the ground forces are not having much success, and the Ukrainians are having success beyond what anybody thought they would achieve. It turns out President Zelensky is a true leader. The man definitely has a flair for the dramatic, with saying such as, "I don't need a ride, I need ammo," and telling the Russians that they won't see their backs, they'll see their faces. The Ukrainian people seem to be united, and the follow-on effect from that seems to be NATO is now united. NATO has seemed to found a spine, and that's a warming effect to me.
If I was the weather forecaster, I think I would have been fired last week. And that is that we talked about several distinct possibilities, possible outcomes from the most optimistic to the most pessimistic. And I was one that said, I doubt it's the most optimistic. I doubt that this is just posturing, that Putin's going to negotiate for what he wants. And then, and then the exercise will end and everybody will go home. And I said, that's a little too optimistic. So I said, if you'll recall, I was pretty sure he would run the middle of the road. And that is, when you saw him declare independence for Luhansk and Donetsk regions. And then I said, yeah, and then peacekeepers. Okay, saw this, called it right. But within 24 hours, it became very apparent that I had called that really wrong. Now, in my defense, the one thing that I think Brent at one point said, okay, Doc, but how's it going to go down? And I said, well, if it ever came to that, and it won't, it's going to be a feign from the east, and then it's going to be a north-south pincer movement. And so, and that didn't take a genius, right? And so it was like, yeah, if it happened, that would be the most clever way to do it, because your cities are vulnerable to the northern and southern boundaries, blah, 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 long lines of logistics from the east. So I called that right, but I was also pretty emphatic that I did not see it going that way, and it certainly did. So, having been wrong already, it's hard to come out of this chute and say, what happens next? Putin is threatening, as well as his government spokespieces are threatening nuclear holocaust. They did that in 2008 in the invasion of Georgia, warning everybody not to intervene. They did that again in Crimea, warning everyone not to intervene in 2014. So this sort of thing is taken less serious. But here's my problem, and this is where I'm going to spend some time talking tonight, is I didn't take Putin's dedication here, or madness, one of the two. But remember, he's surrounded by people who are, sucking up to that madness. I didn't think he was quite as serious as he was about his the threat that he perceived. Doesn't matter whether it's real. It's the threat he perceived to Russia. And so now I have to question even that. Is this just more rhetoric? Certainly hope it is. I expect that it is. But again, I've been wrong on the madness of Putin once. I'm reluctant to be wrong a second time. Let's get into that.
All right. So, yeah, just like Doc said, I was wrong too. I thought 100% that they were going to occupy those two regions, especially after he claimed that they were now, independent countries or areas or whatnot. And I thought that was going to be it. And then next thing you know, freaking invasion kicks off. So he's taken all of us by surprise. Unbelievable. However, I think another big elephant in the room is the Ukrainian defense, guys. I mean, holy shit. After the opening volleys of this invasion, which were reminiscent to, the shock and awe that we saw in OIF 1, freaking Russians have failed to deliver. They've failed. They launched, operations to take major airports, and they were swiftly retaken by the Ukrainians. I think what happened was, this is just me talking out of my ass here, but I think Putin really thought that it was going to kind of be like an OIF 1 scenario, where when we reached, the major cities of Baghdad, we were greeted as liberators. Thousands of people lined the streets surrounding our AEVs when we rolled into Baghdad. I know, I was there. I truly think that's what Putin thought was going to happen, but that's not. It actually is the complete opposite. And another thing I'm surprised about is just the lack of capabilities that we're seeing with the Russian army. It doesn't. I've seen reports that they're not even operating at night because they don't even have night vision. The vast majority of their troops don't have night vision. They're outrunning their supply lines, which, in all fairness, that happened to us during OIF 1 too. We had to take operational halts. But shit, their operational halt was like freaking, it's been like 2 days. So, there's no question. There are massive forces moving in now. I heard something on the news about like a 5-mile long convoy making its way towards Kyiv. So it's about to get freaking nasty. My hat's off to the Ukrainians that have held up a defense at this point. I think because nobody in here is essentially on the side of the Russians in this argument, I think just for the sake of discussion, I'm going to bring up the fact that from the Russians' perspective, they view NATO as their number one strategic threat. And they've said from the get-go, like, Ukraine is not going to become a NATO member. We will not allow that to happen. And true to their word, they're making it happen. They're ensuring that does not happen. So there's that. With that being said, guys, I'm going to open up to the panel so that we can kick this around.
Go ahead, Les.
Okay, well, in my monologue, I forgot to mention to the people of Ukraine, Wolverines! This has been interesting. I definitely thought that when this war kicked off, the Ukrainians would not be doing as well as they did. And in previous live streams, I had made the commentary that, they hadn't upgraded their equipment. They hadn't invested in their defense, even since 2014. Clearly, that's not the case. They've been holding out pretty good. They're unified as a people. I mean, you got to admire a grandma who walks up and puts sunflower seeds in a Russian soldier's pocket so the flowers will grow from his dead body. I mean, you got to admire that. Apparently, the training we sent over at one time, I know, like, I read an article last year, the California Air Guard was there teaching them air combat skills. That's apparently working. The javelins and the NLAWs are having effect. So when Zelensky says, I don't need a ride, I need ammo, that seems to be true. He just needs help. He's definitely has a populace that is united and willing to fight. And I see that the Russians were not as prepared as they should have been. They attempted shock and awe, and they definitely didn't do it to the standard that we would do. Their ability to control the airspace is not there. They don't seem to be coordinating their airstrikes with their ground defensive. And the only mistake I think the Ukrainians have truly made here is, they waited a little bit long to hand out the rifles to the populace. If you want to go with the rifle behind every blade of grass strategy, start watering the lawn a lot earlier.
Hey, on that note, I remember on one of our previous streams, we were talking about, hey, they need stingers. They need stingers. Well, I think the CIA and other entities have been shuttling stingers in there all along. It just hasn't been making the headlines, for a good cause, because there's no way. I mean, you're watching these videos and there are stingers going up left and right, knocking Russian drones out of the skies. They seem to be amply supplied with stingers, in addition to the jabs and the other anti-tank rockets.
In every picture or every video you see of Russian jets, they are throwing flares like crazy. So there must be one hell of a man-pads threat over there.
I am curious about that. You guys are saying that the shock and awe approach doesn't seem to be working. But it seems to me like, in terms of the amount of forces that they had along the border and also along Belarus, I think the number that was estimated was like 120,000, 150,000. Does that sound about right? And it doesn't seem like we're seeing those numbers go in that initial force. Do you think that they're kind of like sort of sending like lemmings, like feelers in, and not committing the whole force up front?
Hey, can I field that one? I mean, obviously we all can, but yeah, so that's the big discussion right now, Michael. It's an excellent question. I think Brent already got to a piece of that, and I genuinely believe that Putin and his advisors did not give the Ukrainian people the same he would demand of the Russian people, and that is nationality, their national pride, and their willingness to say, nope, mine. And these are two people that everybody said, damn, you're cousins. You know, you guys sound alike, you look alike. We're hearing radio recordings from Russians that, you know, tactical recordings that are being translated. And it's very clearly junior level lieutenants and sergeants saying, who the hell do we shoot? Everyone looks like us. So these are cousins in more ways than one. You're seeing Russians living in Ukraine coming out and scolding Russian soldiers saying, what are you doing here? We have our country. You go back to that. I'm a businessman here. You know, I mean, you're just seeing all of this. And I think what happened was Putin genuinely underestimated the Ukrainian people and their military. I think he also greatly overestimated his welcome to it. Now, that said, let me be very clear what I'm going to say next. I am not pro-Russian in this case. I'm not well, I like the Russian people, but I'm not pro-Putin. I'm not pro-invasion. I've been adamantly against this the entire time. But I am going to give an analysis, and that is to follow up on what you said, Michael. Within like day 4, they're estimating between 4 to 6 battle groups. 4 to 6 battle groups have been destroyed, you know. And when we say destroyed, I mean they're combat ineffective, right? Killed, captured, wounded, and just sent packing, or they're halted in place. There are 120 battle groups. That is the estimate, the reasonable estimate of 120 battle groups with something between 130 and 150,000 Russians, north, south, and east of Ukraine. And they only sent in maybe a dozen and a half of 120. That's not, you know, what is that, 10%? And so I think he overestimated it. I think there was a whole lot going on. There was, yes, I think they sent in they tricked some low grade, low tier because they thought, oh, you'll just have to occupy behind the VDV. You'll know you're just being an occupying force. Here's 3 magazines and your armored vehicle, get in and go. And they were tricked into it. These guys have since been defeated and captured, and they're saying, I didn't even know I was going into Ukraine. So I think you're seeing a full gamut from their very elite tier 1 all the way to their rear echelon. But ultimately what it says to me is this: Putin didn't plan this well. The other thing is, I'll say, and we keep making references to OIF. That's a good reference. How many did we have? Oh, that's right. We had 300,000 Americans and 150,000 allies. So we had 450,000 compared to 130,000. And just to put that into magnitude, when people think, oh, Georgia and Russia's overwhelming use of force in Georgia in 2008, that's a country of about 26 million and something like, 26 million, I'm sorry. It's a country of 3.7 million, less than 4 million, and 2,600 square miles, 26,000 square miles, sorry. But again, compare that to Ukraine and you'll see you're looking at 10 to 11 times on both. The population is 44 million, not 4 million, 44. The square mileage is whatever, 320 square miles versus, 320,000 square miles versus 26,000 square miles. It is in order of magnitude, literally to put a zero, exponential, to put a zero at the end of it. So I've been talking a while, but what I'm saying is, maybe we shouldn't be as surprised that Russia is taking as long as it's taking. I think that he did underestimate it. Putin did underestimate them. I think they have not committed their reserves.
I agree with you, Doc. I saw that, they were saying only about half of the Russian forces that were amassed in the area have been committed to the fight, 30% to half. I was one of those that just last week said that I give this Putin about a 30% chance of actually even invading. So obviously I was somewhat wrong about that as well. Be the first one to admit it. But I'll tell you, man, I don't know if I want to be very careful about believing anything we're being told. I remember last week there were some of the people in chat talking about how corrupt Ukraine was, and that's absolutely correct. They failed to mention how corrupt our government was. We are the pot calling the kettle black, and I don't think there's any American, Republican, Democrat, or anything in between that would argue with that. We can all point out examples of where our government has lied to us, not in the last 50 years, in the last month. So let's move forward with that as understanding that, yes, there may be a vastly corrupt government within Ukraine. However, that doesn't mean that they deserve to be invaded by any country using military force. The average person in Ukraine isn't corrupt. She's some single mom out there with a drunk husband trying to raise a kid. And those aren't the kind of people that you should attack. Those are hey, that's America too, right? There's a lot of similarities between us and them. So we see their interviews on television all the time, and it's saddening to see whenever civilians are caught up in some kind of war that they don't know anything about and don't want anything to do with. But where I'm going with this is this: I don't want to get too tied up in all the numbers. This plan may be going 100% exactly on Putin's schedule. You listen to our propaganda, you listen to what the West is reporting, they're saying he's furious that their attack hasn't gone better. How do they know that? I don't know, but how does CNN know that? How does Fox know that? How does the Wall Street Journal know that? How does anybody know that? It could be going 100% according to his plan. But here's where he's losing. He's losing because whether that's true or whether it's propaganda, whether there is the white ghost single MiG-29 being flown by the awesome Ukrainian pilot that's got all the Russian pilots scared in their shaking in their boots, or whether that guy doesn't even exist, that doesn't matter. That happens in a lot of wars. In World War II, Russia was brilliant at doing it, as was Germany. They had aces that had 300, 400 kills, Russian snipers, 300 kills. Those are great for building the morale of the country. And as long as the Ukrainians feel that they're holding back the Russians, as long as the Ukrainians feel that white ghost is up there somewhere trolling around in his MiG-29 downing Russian pilots, that's enough motivation for them to go, well, let's build some Molotov cocktails. Show me how to use this AK. You know what? I'm going to block my driveway with my car. Every little bit of resistance, as minute and as really improbable it is to slow down the Russian machine at all adds up. And that's what we need. We're seeing people, plenty of refugees going out, but you see some going in. You see some going in just to fight for that reason. The slowdown that it appears that Ukraine has had has been really helpful to everyone in NATO is now getting involved. It appears in some kind of way, a positive way. We've even seen a hesitant Germany being dragged in by their jackboots going, you're going to have to support this. And they're saying, look, we have to show some kind of support on this, and no matter how small it is, which is very different than opposition. We're hearing that there's opposition in Belarus. This is very important. We know that they're starting to televise any type of civil unrest in Russia, protest about this. That's really good. And anytime you've got the big bad police dressed in black with body armor beating on women and dragging them away, that's not going to be a good look. If there's anything we know that is true for us here in the United States as well. So the spin on all of this is definitely looking really bad for Russia. I'm not sure if Putin quite calculated that spin that everyone seems to be in lockstep on. Like Michael said, whether you're left or right, it doesn't matter. You can pull up MSNBC, you can pull up Fox, you can pull up AM radio. Everyone is in support, leaning support of Ukraine in this country. And whether we're involved in putting boots on the ground, that's a completely different topic. But we are certainly all seem to be in support of getting military equipment into Ukraine, supplies into Ukraine. And it looks like I've not seen much opposition to things like sending anti-air and anti-tank into Ukraine. and that's a good thing. And you know what? If you can win the propaganda war, you might very well be able to pull off some sort of win in Ukraine. And I'll wrap it up with this, and I think this is something that Brent touched on too. This battle was framed that if Russia rolled a single tank into Ukraine and France would capitulate. They would immediately surrender, and that would be the end of that. A bunch of civilians would get killed, and the war would be over within hours. Now, that's not realistic, but since it was framed that way, the simple fact that it didn't happen that way, that makes Ukraine look like the victor, and it makes Russia look like they don't know what they're doing. And winning that battle is half the battle.
According to Clausewitz, it's all the battle because politics or war is politics by other means. So it's always the political objective that takes precedence over the military objective. But let's talk about what's going on militarily right now anyway. Like I said in my little monologue, strategically, Russia seems to be focused on the cities and kind of ignoring the small towns and rural areas. I mentioned this is reminiscent of the 2003 Iraq invasion, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of operations. They're beelining it for the cities. And that's exactly what we did in the 2003 invasion. We got on the highways and the roads, and we just beeline to Baghdad, beeline to Tikrit, beeline to, whatever other cities were involved there on the way up there. They've made it clear their objectives: find and destroy Zelensky's government and replace it with a pro-Moscow regime. Russian forces are spread out. It looks to be a logistics nightmare. As a map, I'm looking at a map right now on BBC.com. There's basically 4 fronts, and they've got to logistically supply these 4 fronts. You got Donbass, which they got friendly forces already there, but you got major cities. You got Kharkiv and Kiev, and it looks like they're just coming up from the south through Crimea because they own it. They haven't really used large-scale artillery barrages or even attained air superiority. That's kind of interesting. I know a couple speeches back, I thought they were going to use artillery like they did in Chechnya. That hasn't happened yet. I'm sure they're probably preparing for counterinsurgency. Ukraine is prepared for insurgency. I think they're kind of fighting a hybrid war right now with guerrilla and conventional operations simultaneously. It's already been mentioned they probably should have amended their constitution and put a Second Amendment in there before the Russians actually got on the ground. That would have been helpful. I think they're preparing for resistance during an occupation. I saw a recent story on Fox News where they interviewed a young mom who's kind of in a rural area, and they're preparing for, hey, post-war occupation, we're going to be ready to resist as well, which is a good sign. I think Putin wants to save face, and I don't think he's going to stop because of his ego. Again, Bruce brought this up. People argue Ukraine's not a democracy. Zelensky's been accused of jailing political opponents, and Ukraine ranks high on the corruption index. That being said, his patriotism and social media exploits have basically secured a place in our hearts. We all feel bad for the guy. I'm sure I speak for everybody in here. He's willing to stay behind. He didn't want to leave. He made a famous announcement: "Give me bullets. I don't want to ride." So I'm willing to overlook those transgressions, at least for now, in this war. He's the lesser of two evils, the way I see it. Now we have Russia escalating nuclear readiness. We got a Cold War 2.0 going on right now. I think this was directed directly at NATO to keep us out of there. I think it's posturing. I hope I'm right in that he will not actually push the nuclear button. I think he'd be crazy to. But you also, more importantly, have anti-war protests going on in St. Petersburg and other cities around Russia. And as I've said in the past, one of the major challenges of a dictator during a foreign intervention is the fact that you have to fight on 2 fronts, one in the invaded territory and one at home. If you want to keep your power, you have to keep your people in check. You have to keep that iron grip on your society. That takes manpower and money and everything else as well, away from the front lines. So he's going to have a serious problem if these protests continue to escalate. I think over 2,000 people have been arrested in St. Petersburg, I believe is the last I read. The political objective is the objective here. And I think that, fighting his own dissident population and fighting the Ukrainian people as well as the Ukrainian armed forces, he's got a long road ahead of him. if he's going to come out of this successful, and I'm talking about Vladimir Putin. Russia has no coin experience. They tried in Chechnya, they tried in Afghanistan and failed miserably. They ended up just having to demolish Chechnya. That was their counterinsurgency. I'm not sure they're going to fare well in this. They're great at starting insurgencies around the world. You know, we had Russian-backed insurgencies all around the world in Cuba, et cetera, et cetera. They're great at that. They're not great at fighting them. I also wanted to say, going in here as a small contingent of peacekeepers is kind of a departure from Soviet doctrine, Soviet tactics. I found that kind of strange. Somebody else may want to comment on that. I know they're used to conventional battle, deep battle tactics, etc. This is kind of a departure from that. So it's very interesting to watch.
I'm gonna jump in and play devil's advocate. I'm wearing my Wolverine shirt, so you guys know where I stand on this. But just for the sake of argument here, a couple things I want to point out. So, again, we have compared this to OIF a few times already. We're only 4 days into this invasion. It took us over a month to take down the Iraqis. So, food for thought there. The other thing is, let's look at this from the Russian perspective. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. But let's say our number one geopolitical threat, China, and it absolutely is China. Let's say Mexico all of a sudden had, a big civil war uprising and overthrew their current leader, and then they put in and installed a pro-China regime. Okay. And then the Chi-Coms started sending in weapons, weapons after weapons, sophisticated stuff, anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft weapons, stuff like that to Mexico. In our hemisphere, we had the Monroe Doctrine and everything else. So if we invaded Mexico based on that to overthrow this pro-Chi-Com regime, you kind of got the same scenario going on there. So that's just some food for thought there. So
it would never happen, Brent. The narco drug lords would kick them right out. They couldn't handle them. So it's pure. I want
to see some Russian commissar go into the barrio and tell some dude named Little Frog that he's got to submit to the Communist Party. I tell you guys, happening.
I've got my token Mexican in the background. My little wife, all 4'11" of her. And she said that's true when they were talking about the narcos kicking anybody out that's in any kind of way affecting their business and their ability to run the country. So I think that's all Mexicans know what's going on over there. They know what it's about.
All right. Well, I think we're getting down a tangent, but just so we're clear on that one, first off, it's calm right now, but Mexico has a civil war. So Brent's scenario wasn't, completely out of left field. They've been fighting a civil war since 2009, and it heats up and then goes away for, a year and a half and no one hears about it. And then, 47 people are killed at a discotheque on Saturday night. And you go, oh yeah, no, it's still going on. And at one point during 2009 through 2012, I think it was that period, it was like a 3-year period there, that there was as many people dying every single night in Mexico as there were in Iraq. And so, this is during our occupation. This is during that fight. And so I was amazed at how little was discussed about this. And those numbers were something like 60 or 70 people every single night for 3 years straight. Do the math. They had hundreds, well past the 100,000 mark of dead. And so there was a civil war that still lingers on. And I'll go ahead and point out one more thing. The communists do have a reputation in Central America and Cuba and the Caribbean and Central America of walking in, telling all the drug lords and the banana lords and everything else, you do it our way. Oh, you said no? That drug lord, all of his henchmen, all of their families, they all die. And they die quick. And there are no more dissidents. You can hate Castro all day long, and I will join you in your hatred of a Marxist, and particularly Castro. But you got to say one thing. There was a mafia There was a mafia that ran Cuba from 1930s through the 1960s. There was no mafia after Castro took over. They were systematically slaughtered. So could China take Mexico? Yeah. And could they wind up pressuring our border? Yeah. And if they did incursions, good Lord, America would bring its wrath down on them. The difference, though, is the incursions were the other way. The Russians were the ones that were making incursions into Ukraine, not vice versa. And so, yeah, I can't. That's why we're going down a tangent, and I can't say that that has a direct correlation to what we're looking at right now. I will say this, that I do agree with Brent. What he's saying is, I don't want to give credit to Russia. I really don't. But they have not brought their A game, and I'm still waiting for them to go Chechnya, Syria. How did they win in Syria? Artillery. How did they win in Chechnya? Well, they lost the first war because they didn't go artillery. And then they brought artillery and they leveled cities. And so we haven't seen that yet. And I hope we never do, because that's them bringing their A game. That's their strength, man. That's what they do. That said, I'm going to switch gears because it keeps coming up. NATO. Yay, NATO. NATO is a 75-year-old man who is dying on his deathbed, has no weight to him. It's a 75-year-old skeleton that's covered in baggy skin. And he raised his head up to ask for a drink of water, and we all went, yay, NATO's back. NATO's not back. NATO's not back, and NATO is powerless. That NATO doesn't even have teeth in that baggy skin bone. And so EU sends thoughts and prayers, and NATO sends thoughts and prayers, and America sends thoughts and prayers. And now that Ukraine is standing up and has this wonderful, the Ghost of Kiev and the Snake Island, and they have their resolve, and we say, damn, these dudes are awesome, and they're going to take the fight to the Russians, and I'm all jazzed about that too. And we're going, yeah, and we're their friends. Dude, Ukraine is in a bar fight right now. They've been knifed twice. The bad guy's on top of them, choking them out on the floor. And we're going, don't worry, I've got it all on cell phone, and I'm going to turn this over to the police when this is done. And we're trying to pat ourselves on the back. Brent, this is your show. I won't say what I think of the US, NATO, and EU right now because I couldn't do it without profanities.
Doc, I'm a little unclear. Could you expand on your feelings here? I can't quite get where you're going.
Hey, profanity is accepted here, by the way.
You can't have this many Marines without profanity. It's like in the Constitution or some shit.
I tell you, NATO, you're right, Doc. And I don't know that any of us disagree. And if anybody does, they're welcome to speak up. But it's a rusty blue helmet sitting in the corner of a damp, dark barracks that's still watching a black and white TV and has a map of Europe from 1960. It's just it's not what anybody thinks it is. If I had intruders lined up outside my house and I called 911 and they said, "Don't worry, NATO's on the way," I would know I was all alone and that I would have to take care of that myself. I don't know that anybody really respects NATO that much. But, if you think about NATO, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, but NATO is essentially a group of countries that are compelled to go defend another country, regardless of why they were attacked, regardless of the reasoning behind it. That's not very motivating for anybody. Now, for us in the United States, because we see ourselves, right or wrong, as the head of NATO, and NATO sees us as the head of NATO. They take their keys from us. I don't see them just being effective anywhere short of small country peacekeeping incursions that no one really knows about. Whenever you hear about some NATO convoy getting attacked somewhere, every time I'm like, where is that? Let me look that up.
So that's
African
no,
village.
that's
Two great
things.
And let me, can we just take a moment to recognize the irony of this situation? Ukraine is a sovereign nation. and it says, I want to join NATO because I see this as a strategic, component of our defense, a component of our strategic defense. So it says, I want to do this. Russia says, no, you can't, because that threatens our sovereignty and our security. And they argue back and forth, and now they're in an all-out brawl, just a war that's got nothing but tragedy written all over it, all because Ukraine thought that hooking up with the 75-year-old dead guy would save them. Right now, Ukraine needs to recognize and maybe it's right to thank the EU for their bullets. Maybe it's right to thank America for thoughts and prayers. But the fact is, if Zelensky needs to understand right now, NATO is never coming to their aid. And he was wrong to hitch his wagon to that. It got him in a war he didn't need. It could never help them.
Well, so are you guys, because I have several questions, but one is, all right, clearly you think that NATO's weak, right? So are you saying that you want to see a stronger NATO, or are you saying that you want to see a dissolved NATO, like it shouldn't exist, period?
That's a great point. Okay, hold on. So let's look. We know the League of Nations failed, but that's not very relevant. Let's look at the United Nations. It comes out of the door and goes right into Korea. And it gets this coalition together and it fights a war. And quite frankly, for all the naysayers who say Korea was a failure, it was a failure because it didn't take down China. The fact is, the NATO contingent to South Korea did exactly what it was supposed to do: save South Korea. That's what it was supposed to do. It did it. And today, Korea is a leader of the world. It's the most resounding success UN ever has. It packed up its doors. It's never enjoyed success again, ever. Categorically, failed. NATO was powerful through the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then it said, oh, no, Soviet Union, we're done. So you're right. Would I like to see a strong NATO? Yes. Yes, I would. But if it's not going to be strong, can we for now, for once and forever, America, pull out of NATO and pull out of the UN? Just stop it, because it doesn't help anyone.
Isn't NATO more of a reaction to USSR aggression? And that is the purpose of it. It's essentially, hey, you attack one Western nation, you have to deal with us all, in which the USSR also had the Warsaw Pact as like as the counter to it. So that is the purpose. And I find that to be a valuable purpose as a deterrent, right? Kind of also along sort of mutually assured destruction with nuclear armament, but that's kind of going a different direction. So there is a value there to NATO. I don't think necessarily it wasn't Ukraine wanting to get into NATO, is Ukraine wanting to get into the EU. That was a little bit more of a catalyst for it. But the other thing is that, and I've heard this from professors and whatnot that study like Russian history and study like Putin, is that in his speeches, and especially the one that I think was like pre-recorded before the invasion, Putin, he has a KGB history. That's where he's from. He's wanting to go to the good old days. He wants the USSR, and I think that's always been like, that's what he wants to set as his legacy. And he kind of has that with like Belarus being back in the fold. There's a lot of like Eastern Bloc countries that have become NATO members. Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, all of those that are to the western border of Ukraine. And I think that's his overall purpose in doing this invasion, is that he wants to bring back the old days. So I would be I would be curious to see or hear your guys' thoughts in terms of like Ukraine did ask for an emergency petition to get into the EU, and what obviously that would they take a lot of vetting, but like what effect would that have? And then of course Poland, all these other countries that are right on the border that are NATO members, what do you think would happen if an artillery shell or something from the Russian side hit one of those troops? Are we going to use that as a reason to then get involved?
Right. Well, can we answer the first part of your question? Because you posed like three right in a row, but that's good. They're all excellent questions.
Right back to you, Doc. you know, 4 points in one freaking one monologue.
You're right. You're right.
Tough to keep up.
So yes, you're and fair play. I mean, turnabout is fair play. So NATO, first off, my loose interpretation of what NATO just did, and the EU for that matter, but I didn't expect any different from the EU. What NATO just did was, and you see all the apologists in the columns going, oh, but they didn't spell their name right on the application, and so legalese, and I don't really have to help them because they're not a member yet because they misspelled their passport. No, hold on, bud. You like the guy or you don't like the guy. You're gonna help or you're not gonna help. You don't cower in the corner of this fight and say, but they spelled their name wrong on the application. So that's my one problem with NATO. And the second problem is this. Right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a genocide 4-year war. This is not the first European war since World War II. This is the second. The first one was in Bosnia, Kosovo, with Serbia, and it was a 4-year genocide that NATO could not solve in their own backyard with blue helmets and white tanks. Americans came in after 4 years, and the war ended in 3 days. It ended so quickly that no Americans got into a set piece battle because they were told, we don't know who the good guy and bad guy are. Move to the sound of guns, kill everybody shooting. Everybody that doesn't look like you. And it was done 3 days. So my point is NATO just was emasculated and humiliated by this. And their response, and I just had German friends staying here all weekend, and I talked about this, and they were like, look, here's what we did since then. In the 25 years since then, we were so humiliated. We said, only extremist losers go into the army. And notice also that they stopped conscription about that time. And they said, no, the military, no, they're losers. They're extremists, they're dangerous, they're the outcasts and dredges of society, and they systematically weakened their militaries.
Let me say in the chat here, we're not confusing the UN with NATO, but they are one and the same when it comes to being paper tigers. We understand that there's a difference, but there are extreme parallels and similarities there between their purpose and what they're doing around the world. I don't know. I mean, that's such a good question, Michael, when you ask, should we support NATO and build NATO up, being the United States, or should we just completely get out of NATO altogether? I will tell you, a year ago, I would say, let's get out of NATO altogether. Maybe it's time for some new type of organization that's more focused on what's going on in the world today than what was going on in the 1960s. But I will say this, look, if you're Ukraine, you're asking for help anywhere you can get it right now. You don't care. I'm sure they have ambassadors and all kinds of obscure organizations all over the world going, sure, we'll take that crate of AK-47s. Where do I sign to join some type of a peace treaty or organization with you? Just get us whatever. We'll take it. Those 5 helmets you've got in the corner of your closet, sure, send them over. We'll sign whatever you want. And I don't blame them for that. But the fact that a country like Ukraine, and it appears that there are other countries also that still, maybe wrongly so, look up to the United Nations and look up to NATO and say, hey, we would like to be a part of this organization because we understand that if we were a part of this organization, that you would be compelled to come in and protect us in this situation where we're being attacked by a large modern country with an overwhelming force. Well, there's something to be said about that, Michael. And so in we're looking at it through that prism, maybe we should build NATO up in Europe. And guys in the chat, you're right. Like NATO was, and Michael, you're right. NATO was put in place to counter the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact is no more. The Warsaw Pact is long gone. So why do we still have NATO there? Well, this is a perfectly good reason why. Again, Putin seems to have aspirations of building Russia up again. And Doc, you were right in a conversation we had a couple of streams back in that we don't believe that Putin wants to be Stalin. We don't agree that Putin wants the Warsaw Pact of the 1950s and 60s, but he would like to make it bigger and better, like all good people that take those views are. They sort of believe through that political prism, whether it's communism or socialism or Leninism or something that comes thereafter, that if we just did it a little bit better, we could be successful at it. Putin doesn't want to be the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union crumbled and failed under its own weight. He wants to create something bigger and better with a flair of capitalism, trade and banking with other countries. So if we can create a NATO that is counter to that, tweak that NATO, make that NATO better, and maybe that's a good thing. And it looks like that's what countries are looking for us to do. Maybe that's something we should do. It's not been a topic I've heard anybody in the news talk about. You're finding it right here on Brent Stream for the first time live. So for those of you that are here, maybe we're on to something.
Hey, NATO View. This came out a few days ago. It's by the owner of Vaustaleka over in Finland. And it says, "Dear Prime Minister, Finland should ally itself right now. Our defense forces only exist because of Russia. If we did not share a land border with Russia, we would do like Sweden and Western Europe countries did, practically disband our military. But we have that border, and we have 1 million reservists. It's not enough. Our defense forces are not there to repel a Russian invasion, because that is not possible. They are there to make an invasion too expensive for Russia. Unfortunately, our neighbor right now do not care about expenses or suffering of their own soldiers. It's only going to change either way. Putin is a president for life. NATO technically has 3 reasons not to join NATO. We would be pledged to fight someone else's war. We fear that Russia will turn aggressive. And 3, we would lose our trade relations with Russia. The first reason is still valid. The whole idea of a defensive union is that one country is attacked, others come to its aid. That's exactly the kind of alliance we want. The other reasons become null and void today. Russia won't be much more aggressive than they already are, so there go the trade relations. We have nothing to lose when it comes to joining NATO. We have much to gain. Russia has become unpredictable. At the same time, it's risen its military force from the post-Soviet disarray. Russia is backing into a corner and less to lose. Additionally, it has become fully dependent on the sale of fossil fuels in a situation where the rest of the planet Earth is getting rid of them, and that's a volatile situation. Finally, when it comes to doing something about Ukraine, joining NATO is the only punch Russia can feel. Most important thing is to do it now. All of the West hates Russia now, and Russia's attention is focused on the Ukraine. At this precise moment, it has the lowest attention to retaliate us for joining NATO. If we wait, the alliance is just as more important, but joining is more difficult. Our country needs strong leadership. We need you to make the right decision."
So there are clearly some nations out there that see a lot of value in NATO for various reasons. And the small nations that comprise Eastern Europe need it, because none of them by themselves can stop the Russians. And if Vlad wanted to, if there was no NATO, he could pick each one off at his leisure.
I think you also have to ask, why does Vladimir Putin see NATO as such a threat? Maybe that sheer deterrence in itself is a reason for NATO to exist.
But also, NATO's got some serious problems. Only the United States, Great Britain, Estonia, and Greece have kept up its commitment for 2% to put to defense. And Greece really doesn't deserve credit, because that's part of the conditions of their loan repayments to the Germans, which I find ironic, because the Germans are the least keeping up with their commitment. But most of NATO's not keeping up with it. So it is a paper tiger. For it to not be on its deathbed, like Doc said, it's got to invest in its future, and it needs to have massive military spending. The Germans say they're going to do that. Proof will be in the pudding. The other thing it needs to do, and this will be distasteful to the Europeans as a whole, but they need to bring conscription back. They need to get their numbers back up. And it's a quick and easy way to do it. The way they were doing it was wrong, because they got down to conscription being 9 months. You can't teach anybody anything in 9 months. But they need to go back to 2-year conscription and get their armed force back up until they can reverse their thing where the military became the outcasts and such, as you mentioned, Doc.
Les, how much did Donald Trump pay you to say that? You sound exactly like he did just a few years ago. But he was right.
Man was not wrong.
Well, no, whether you like him or love him or hate him or whatever the case may be, listen, a country that's going to be involved there, they have to live up to their agreements. They have to pay their fair share. And here I sound like a socialist saying that, or at least a Democrat. But you got to pay your fair share in one of those organizations, man. You got to build up your military. If you're going to be a group of people that are going to defend off some type of foreign fight, you all have to contribute. You all have to have skin in the game. Germany, I'm talking to you. You've been a disappointment since 1945, and it's time for you to grow some huevos, step up to the plate, and pay your fair share, man. Get involved. Like Germany, in my opinion, should be leading Europe, not be the little sissy brother that nobody likes to play ball with.
Well, they are now, right? As of like yesterday.
Listen, you know what they are right now, Brent? They're the sissy brother that nobody likes to play with, that mom goes, let him play on your team. That's what they are right now.
What you got, Chad? You've been quiet. Or Michael, both of you two.
I'm just trying to process right now.
Well, I think maybe we can kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about what Ukraine needs to do from here, what the U.S. needs to do from here. As far as Ukraine goes, I think maybe keep preparing for guerrilla war. There's going to be a distinction here between rural insurgency and urban insurgency. The urban resistance is currently going on now, it seems, but these rural areas need to prepare for a post-war occupation. Weapons caches, food caches, establish resupply routes, etc. Sun Tzu said no state ever profited from protracted war. And I think that needs to be their kind of their focus, is just prolonging this. Obviously, like Doc said, Russia was not prepared for this at all. It doesn't seem like it at all. There doesn't seem to be any motivation among their forces to continue to push forward. Like I've said several podcasts back, that the Russians are fighting for their leader's ego. The Ukrainians are fighting for survival here. And who's going to win when you got that type of motivation for, the survival of your country versus your leader's ego? Who's going to win that fight? And I think we're seeing that firsthand right now. I think the use of social media by Zelensky has been spot on. We're all, I think, waving the Zelensky flag right now because of everything he's said and done on TV. This has been highly effective. I think he can probably appeal to the Russian people at this point, maybe. I know they have state-controlled media, and it may not get through, but hey, you never know. I also think I've been thinking a lot about this for America as well, but I think they follow the French Foreign Legion example, maybe establish a foreign legion in Poland, and if they can, and train foreign fighters, and if they need to eventually come in and help out, so be it. I think if Zelensky is killed, he'll become a martyr. I don't think it'll take away from the cause at all. I think that will be a rallying cry for his countrymen to continue. And I don't think the people will tolerate occupation, even if they lose. This is at least the vibe that I'm getting from the interviews that I'm seeing. So if anybody else has any thoughts on what Ukraine needs to do from here, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off that. And so again, throwing in an OIF-1 reference. So when we were all staged in Kuwait training, like, we knew what we were doing there. Like, we knew we were training to go invade Iraq. We didn't know if it was going to be a for sure thing, but we knew once we got, the balloon went up, it was time to go. That's exactly what we were doing. I don't think those Russians knew that they were going to kick this off. I think they literally were told we were going to be doing a big training exercise, right? And then it was just, at maybe hours before, it's like, all right, guys, we're actually going to go into Ukraine. This is legitimate. Because you got to think about the OPSEC. We heard the Russians, all their ambassadors, even Putin, over and over, this is just training exercise, just training exercise. So it's like, you can't have Lance Corporal fucking Ivan texting his mom, like, no, we're going in. This is it. So anyways, I say that to say the capabilities of the Russians during this invasion have just been like, what is going on? Like, I remember reading an article talking about Russian jamming systems, right? Jamming these Turkish drones. This is pre-invasion. They were jamming these Turkish drones to where the Ukrainians weren't able to use them, in some of the eastern areas. And then now we're seeing footage of Ukrainian using Turkish drones to literally conduct strikes on Russian convoys. And it's like, where are these Russian capabilities? Like, where the fuck are their aircraft? Where are their drones? Where are their jamming systems? Like, we're talking, this is leading up to this. I mean, Russia in our minds, we never held them on the same scale as China, but we knew they were technologically advanced. They have hypersonic missiles, for Christ's sake. Like, how have they not established air superiority? So I say that to say this. I think what the Ukrainians need to be doing, they need to keep up with this, this Alamo mentality, right? They're winning the social media war. Everybody here in the States is like watching this like it's a movie. Like, it's the movie where everybody's prepping all the defenses. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger and his special forces guys pulling up the fucking log up into the tree, prepping for Predator, right? That's what's going on here in the States. That's what we're seeing 24/7. And everybody's on board with it. There needs to be partisans or something out there. Ukraine's a huge country. All the Russians are on the roads, main MSRs, moving in staging positions to take Kyiv. They need to be just wearing those motherfuckers out as they're coming down the roads. So on top of these drone strikes.
All right, so I want to get to those great questions and SNS's question there. So what needs to happen? First off, I'm going to say that from what I'm hearing, Zelensky is setting himself up for the perfect 2024 presidential election here in the United States. God.
Yeah, did they straw poll him at CPAC because that might have overthrown Trump's win?
Yeah. I tell you what, I'd vote for him. I think the other thing that needs to happen, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, but I tell you what, here's the thing. They're getting hit from three sides. So it's just simple math, right? North, south, and east are done. You've got friendly borders on the west. We need to see a steady convoy of supplies coming in. And I think we need to pull something from the Russian playbook with their unconventional warfare. And that is that we need to see a bunch of Hungarians and Poles trained with M1 tanks line up on the western side and then plaster, Ukrainian patches all over themselves and their tanks and go, das vidanya, baby, whatever. And I mean, when you're flying your jets and everything else, they're wearing, Ukrainian and wearing uniforms and stuff. And what do you know? They're just like, oh, I didn't know the Ukrainians had Apache gunships and, F-22s and M1 Abrams. Okay, guess they did. They had them in reserve. And that's what kind of needs to happen in addition to the logistical support. And honestly, I'm seething at the EU and UN and NATO, but I will say that after they pulled their head out of their fourth point of contact, they seem to have said, oh, you do need bullets. And they seem to be willing to do this now. So will Russia see it as an act of war? I'd say Russia would be correct to see that, interpret that as an act of war. So for God's sakes, plaster a blue and yellow flag over everything we drop in, and let's go.
Well, I think that, Russia's Putin's already directly addressed that. If it wasn't today, it was yesterday, where he basically said, hey, any country caught supporting Ukraine is going to be put on my shit list, right? Okay, whatever, right? As they should be, and put my name at the top of your list, like whatever, right? Like that's kind of how war goes. I think that no country should be deterred by that, by the simple fact that he's addressing that shows you that it must be effective and it must be causing him to lose a little bit of sleep. So that's exactly what we should do. I got a couple of points that I wanted to make here on a few things that have been flowing through chat and here in the panel as well. It seems like one of the points to sort of make is that there keeps being this like recurring theme that, these Soviet troops are conscripts, they're new, they don't have combat experience, they don't know what's going on. That actually seems to be true. Whereas the opposite is true for Ukrainians. Ukrainians have been fighting in the Donbass region for years, and a lot of these are hardened. Those that are still around and aren't blown apart, they're hardened combat troops. Seeing death and destruction is nothing new to them. Being under fire is nothing new to them. I'm seeing so many Russian vehicles. I was just looking at a video the other day, a popular one that was being shared by Rob over at the AK Operators Union. Everybody knows who he is if you're on a gun guy on the internet at all. And this video basically showed all this large convoy of Russian vehicles completely smashed, right? I didn't see any bodies. Where are the bodies? Anytime armor gets smashed, there's bodies inside, there's bodies outside. That's just, unfortunately, the gruesome way that it is. But they weren't there. Why? They abandoned those vehicles at the time or right before those vehicles got hit, right? So they're not, these are troops that as soon as the going gets tough, and listen, I'm not blaming them. I wouldn't want to be in an armored vehicle when it's got some type of drone overhead either. We've all seen what happens to those things when they cook off. But I would not, I don't blame them for that, but the bodies aren't there. So what that tells me is that they were abandoned beforehand. Probably as soon as they took fire, those guys were like, the heck with this. Their heart's not in the fight, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Whereas the Ukrainian heart seems to be in the fight. And then therefore morale, which is what that comes down to, that can win or lose battles. And when you're some politician thousands of miles away, whether you're in DC or whether you're in Moscow, and you're giving orders to guys and they're on the ground and their lives matter. They've got a home to go back to, a girlfriend to go back to, a kid to go back to. If their heart's not in it, they're not going to fight the way that you expect them to. That might be some of what we're seeing unfold. Another thing that I would say is that 5 mile convoy everybody's talking about, right? Why is that not in smoke and wheels blown apart? Why are there not bodies strewn for 5 miles? Why are we not talking about, if we've got a drone over there and we are seeing a stopped convoy 5 miles long, that should be a destroyed convoy 5 miles long. Whether we're using artillery, drones, laser beams, I don't give a crap how you get rid of them. But when you've got an invading military that is our adversary, is NATO's adversary, is Ukraine's adversary, and they're lined up 5 miles long inside of a sovereign country, there should be no drone footage of them sitting there running out of fuel. Why were they allowed to run out of fuel, and why are they not destroyed and removed from the face of the planet? That should be nothing but a scrapyard for children to play on next week.
Yeah, to jump in there on one of Doc's comments, you know, there are parts of the Ukraine that are still under Ukrainian control, and the aid should be coming in, to quote Richard Nixon on the Yom Kippur War. I want to see an airlift that makes Berlin look like a training exercise. You know, reinforce them that boldly. You know, put it in because there's sovereign territory. We'll land at sovereign airports. Maybe even go as far as taking over an airport and daring him to do anything. You know, in Rota, Spain right now, we have 4 ships, part of the ballistic missile defense group that's there to protect Europe. Sail them into the Black Sea and dare them to fire a missile.
Wow, some really good comments coming in on you for you saying both of your comments. I will say this, Bruce, my estimate is the reason you don't see that 8 mile convoy in flames is because the reality is Ukraine defenses don't have that. They're playing a good defensive game, but a very weak offensive game. So that's one thing. I do agree with you, Les, that, you know, this is what I'm saying about the weakness. I'm seeing some positive movement, and I want to, when someone's doing something right, you don't punish them, right? And so NATO and EU are trying to do the right thing. So is the US, barely. But they're trying to. But you're right. Why are we not flying all these aircraft into Ukraine? And the answer is, well, duh, there's a war going on. Oh, is Ukraine not sovereign? Have we given up on Ukraine? Because we should just be dumping it in, and unabashedly so, right? And so that too is a weakness, I perceive. Lastly, someone else pointed, it's like, look, if you really want to talk about the desperation, I'm quoting somebody who just in the comments, he said, you don't hand Molotov cocktails to little old women and tell me you're winning the war. You know what I'm saying? So there's different perspectives, and I want to draw out this, that what Bruce said is correct. If you could do let me get my hands right, something like that. This is, this is politics, right? And this is time over here. And you're losing the political will when you're the offending, attacking. So Putin is losing the political fight here. No question about that. Let's do that again. This is time, or this is experience, and this is time, and it's going like this. What I'm trying to say here is every day that Russia stays in Ukraine, Russia weakens politically. Every day that Russia stays in Ukraine, their soldiers are getting the shit kicked out of them. They're learning to fight. They're getting angry. And oh, by the way, every Ukrainian experienced warrior that dies cannot be replaced, but every Russian can be.
Let me address one thing there, and then I'm going to sit on my hands. I promise, guys. But this is sort of important. So I've got a buddy whose wife is from Belarus, which is interesting. Her mom is sort of stuck over there. Her mom likes to travel back and forth here, look after the kids and all. And so she's from Belarus. And so I've got a bit of a female perspective on that. And Belarus is essentially a satellite country of Russia. Russia, just recently, they were sort of accused, although it seems to be downplayed now. It seems that they were accused of agreeing to provide forces to Russia, but at least they're providing land to Russia with which to launch this attack from the north. And therefore, Belarus is going to be sanctioned and treated much like Russia was. No travel, bank account seized, that kind of thing. Fine with that. He doesn't like it. I understand. He's a bit of a conundrum there. But where I'm going with this is that the propaganda that's coming out of Russia, Belarus is also subject to that. And it seems like they felt like this was going to be, that this was just a training exercise. The tanks were there just for training, just for a show of force. This was not going to kick off into a war. Now, let me take you to another direction. There's a guy I follow on YouTube called Survival Russian. I don't know if any of you guys watch him. If you're preppers or something to that effect, you might. He's an entertaining guy. He's from somewhere in Scandinavia. Don't get offended because I don't know which one of those little ass countries he's from. But he moved to Siberia years ago. He speaks good English. He's learning Russian. He's got a Russian wife. He's got a Russian family over there. And basically he's in this like village, his house he took over from the Soviet era. When the Soviets collapsed, these villages just disappeared. People left and went to the city. And he's got this sort of like farming homestead there out in 4 foot of snow. And he just shows like different things, like how do we survive in 4 foot of snow? How do we survive when it's 50 degrees below zero? Blah, 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 blah. He goes out in the woods behind his house. But what's interesting about this guy is that he did multiple videos over the last few weeks about how wrong we were in thinking that Russia would invade Ukraine. So I've got Belarusians on one side of Russia saying that this is all just a training exercise. I've got this guy from some Scandinavian country all the way on the other side of the continent saying that that was Russian propaganda. And here's where we are now. Now that there are actually Russians inside Ukraine and the invasion is indeed real, I think Russian people across the country are shocked, surprised, realize that they were lied to, and know now that that there's more to the story than what they were told on Russian TV.
I did something I did want to kind of bring up earlier that got touched on. So we're talking about, I mean, like Brent said, it's early and it hasn't even been like a full week yet. So, you know, a lot of other developments could happen, but you know, how do we read this? Is this, do we read how it started so far as like ineptitude and being unprepared on the Russian side? You know, do we read it as, oh no, this was just just like kind of a pinprick to see where the weak points are and then really send in the full force there from there? But let's say it is the earlier one. Let's say that maybe the Russian army, you know, their command and control and whatnot isn't as well disciplined as what we expected. Does this then give us a little bit more comfort and being a little bit more aggressive and replying in terms of what we would do as a consequence if Russia proceeds further, or if, you know, kind of from there, and they're like involving NATO or doing more heavily military supplies to the Ukrainians? Man, no one's jumping on that one. I thought that was a good one. Damn.
Ruler,
I thought that was right up your alley, guys. Come on.
You know, it is. It's a great question, but I was kind of waiting for Chad. He's our numbers guy, so I was waiting for Chad to jump in there.
Yeah, I'm full disclosure.
Police board with a map on it somewhere. So go check.
Full disclosure, I was distracted by the comments here. They're coming in pretty quick. So I'm sorry, Michael. What was your question?
Oh, I can't repeat that poetic question that I just put forth. No, question is that, all right, is Russia in fact a paper tiger that their command and control, their troops aren't as well trained, don't, obviously, you know, like we talked about earlier, don't have the fight in them necessarily, because really they're fighting their cousins. Does this now give the West and our response more leeway or more willingness to respond in aggressive posture, or going even like further in our military supplies to the Ukrainians?
Well, as far as being emboldened, I'm not sure what we're gonna do. You know, he has raised the status of his nuclear forces. We can't overlook that. You know, the media, I don't think they are right that he's losing his mind. I think Putin is cold and calculated, but you don't know. We really don't know. He does have his finger on the nuclear button. Who knows what's going to happen? Are they a paper tiger? I hate to say this, but I don't know. I really don't know. We had this discussion for several weeks on this podcast, and you know, some of us, myself included, thought that he was just saber rattling, and this wouldn't have happened, and it did. So I don't really know. I don't think anybody really. We're like Ricky Bobby. We don't know what to do with our hands right now. And right now, economic sanctions is kind of the best we got. I think the U.S. could do more with lethal aid. You know, it's been going around. What's that?
In what respect do you think the U.S. could do more in lethal aid?
Well, I mean, Poland's right next door. I'm sure instead of giving Ukraine $300 and something billion, let's give it to Poland to manufacture AK-47s and spread them throughout the country. That's one suggestion. Because they're not going to win this war conventionally. It's not going to happen. They're gonna have to. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. Is when Russia's going to leave eventually, if they do, or you know, they may end up a nuclear winter wasteland. Who knows? Going back to, I have no idea what Putin's going to do. We've been waging economic warfare only. There's cyber warfare. I'm sure our guys are on top of it. We probably got guys in Space Force. You know, we forget all about Space Force, and they actually exist, but they're out there. They're the technological geeks out there, probably working on some crazy hacker stuff right now, doing all kinds of you know, computer warfare and stuff like that. I think one thing we should really consider is sanctioning gas and oil exports out of Russia. I hope we're not, you know, sanctioning them with this hand and still buying our oil with this hand. I mean, what sense does that make?
That's a good point, because that is the one last thing. Like, I mean, the sanctions that have happened to date have been pretty severe and quick, but the one that's not been done is cutting off the oil supply and the gas supply from Russia, which makes up 40% of EU's energy. So if the EU, US, UK, if we were to do that, right, which would obviously drive up oil prices and oil prices here in the United States, is anyone here going to criticize the American government for a rise in our oil or in our gas at the pump?
No.
Yes, we're all spoiled.
This is a false dichotomy. And again, my European friends are telling me that's a false dichotomy. And let me tell you why. So Gazprom, they stopped the Nord Stream, but that's not a finished project, right? And so Gazprom is delivering natural gas to Europe. And you're right, it's just overwhelming. I hear it's something like 40%. But gas also comes through the Baku-Tbilisi pipeline in the south. So while Armenia is agreeing right now with Russia to shut it down, it hasn't. And Russia does not benefit from that pipeline. But all of this is for naught, because here's the reality. Germany and much of Europe is getting ready to, but has not yet, shut down their nuclear reactors. They have power that can sustain them for quite some time. I'm not saying, let's not be naive. Oh, if you shut off Gazprom, there wouldn't be a blip in your, in your energy levels. Yes, of course there would. And it would become more expensive and it would be uncomfortable. But this is the problem, that Gazprom makes so much profit that Putin is at least partially funding this campaign in Ukraine through Gazprom that continues to be a service. Gazprom's in Siberia, by the way, and it continues to be a service to Europe. So this is very problematic, and it's slightly immoral when you realize, A, the Baku-Tbilisi pipeline still brings that in for Europe, and B, you have nuclear power. You have nuclear reactors. So yeah, I'm struggling, Michael, with what you're saying. Not because you're saying it, but I'm struggling with this sort of, oh, we're committed as long as it's not inconvenient for us. But look, let's point the finger inward. It's not like we're putting sanctions on China and China's backed them. We're not about to get more expensive Kmart products. Please.
Michael, let me chime in on what you said. You're not going to like this, by the way. I can't wait to see your face. But yes and yes, we should be sanctioning Russian oil. Hit them right in the gut, right where it hurts. Absolutely. Will that drive gas prices up in the United States? Absolutely. Yes, it will. Will that help the Republican Party? You bet it will. And when we blame Biden for that, you can take your money to the bank. We will blame Joe Biden for that. Listen, it's a bullshit scenario, all right? But it is what it is. We are Americans. We are short-minded. When those soccer moms go to fill out those giant SUVs to take their kids to soccer practice and their tank of gas went from $74 a tank to $100 a tank, they are not going to vote for Joe Biden for president. They are simple-minded, and that's just how it is. That's just life, and it sucks for you. But it's a cold, hard slap of reality. And if the shoe was on the other foot, you guys would do it too. It's politics, America, politics, USA.
Well, at least the six
Anybody
of us,
else,
the
Bruce,
six
for
of us
press
here, though,
secretary?
can say like, hey, I stand with the Ukrainians. I will make this sacrifice. This is our modern day victory gardens, so to speak. And it's a small sacrifice. Well, it's not a small sacrifice because for those that are poor, filling up a tank going to work is a huge effect. But yeah,
I'll tell you how it is, Michael. It's like this. It's like, well, am I willing to pay a little more for gas every week? Yes, I am. Am I willing to pay a little more for gas every week if it keeps Russia suppressed and helps Ukraine? Yes, I am. But when I hear somebody next to the pump going, God dang, gas is so high, am I going to under my breath say, hey, go Brandon? Yeah, I am, buddy.
Well, of course we are, because we should be drilling all that stuff here anyways. We were energy independent, right? But I don't want to get too far on domestic because we're talking about fighting Russians in Ukraine. So let's not forget about China, though.
Well, no. But China. So the question there, Michael, I would say that historically, I'm not talking. I can't, like everybody else said. I don't know, is Russia a paper tiger or not? Here's what I can say is that historically, both China and Russia, and I think it's because of their landmass and or their populations, they've always been very good and reasonably effective at defensive wars. So I don't think they're a paper tiger at all if you're invading Russia. And this
no. I think we all know you don't invade Russia.
There you go.
I think enough people have repeated that mistake. I'm just saying. I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I apologize.
Well, but just saying that for the most part, there are exceptions. The end of World War II, once Russia finally, matured and stopped murdering all of its best generals, that once they grew back over the course of World War II, they wind up being a very good offensive force. But China and Russia historically have always kind of suffered that, outside their own traditional boundaries. They've always suffered as a projected military force. Again, they have their successes. I don't want to take that away. So I'm just not sure. Are they a paper tiger? They seem very modern. but I think we're all coming to it. I think most of the Russian forces were not properly indoctrinated to believe that the Ukrainians were bad guys. They're going, what? Ukrainians? You mean we're gonna fight the, I don't know, X. We're gonna fight the French? We'll take it right to them. We'll get those Syrians. You betcha the Chechens are bad. But when you said, and we're going after the Ukrainians, and everybody goes, wait, but who, what?
It may have been more simple than that. It may have been just that all those troops were told that it's just a training exercise to keep it secret. And then, because you can't tell all those guys that you're actually going to go to war and don't tell anybody, because they're on their social media, they're on their Instagram, telling everybody, "Hey, baby, I don't know what's going to happen. We're being told we're going to go to war." Like, it's hard to keep those things quiet. And then when you finally do tell them, "Okay, we're crossing the border, and be advised, you may take fire," they're like, "What? We're not mentally prepared for this. We've been told this whole time it was a training exercise." That may be one of the miscalculations with Putin.
And that's what all the Russian EPWs are saying on camera. Now, obviously, there's a possibility that could be coerced. However, there's been multiple videos of Russian soldiers saying just that. Like, we all thought we were lied to. We all thought we were doing a training exercise, and then next thing we know, we're getting told to cross the border. So yeah. I do want to say this: Ukraine's got this going for them. I'm not yet ready to say Russia is a paper tiger. They are fighting a restricted war. And what I mean by that is they are legitimately trying not to kill civilians. Now, that's going to be contrary to everything we're seeing on the news, obviously. But I can tell you 100% certainty that during OIF 1, we weren't trying to kill civilians. But there were a lot of civilians killed during OIF 1. A lot of civilians. And we weren't trying to kill civilians. It's the nature of war. But you can just tell that the Russians are not deliberately, at least. Now, I know there's a video of a Russian tank running over a car. Like, you're going to see that stuff, but I would say the orders coming down from higher are probably reduce civilian casualties. And I want to remind you guys that we have not seen Bear bombers flying overhead Ukrainian cities, just absolutely carpet bombing them. So,
well, yeah,
or Katyusha rockets being fired into cities, which we know that they have. So there is a level of restraint because they know the optics when they start hitting schools and civilian targets. And anytime you fire into a city, there's going to be women and children. That's just how it is. It's unfortunate, but it's how it is.
God damn it, guys! You brought up like other things, and then I lost my train of thought. Jeez, and I even have the notepad here. You're all working against me. I know it. Well, what I was saying more so is like in terms of Ukraine, like, so Putin has, in terms of the story that he's put forth, right, to the Russian people as well as to most likely his own army, is that, hey, we're rescuing Ukrainian civilians from the tyranny of the Ukrainian government. And so maybe that is sort of the that's what the motivating factor is going in there. But seeing, from the technology standpoint, like I read one thing that they had captured a Russian drone like some years ago. This was years back. And looking at the technology, it wasn't anything that was like developed within Russia. It was all pieces and parts that were bought from China or bought from the US and put together. And so from that like technology perspective that they're using that, and then seeing in terms of like how the command and control is going, like obviously, like if Russia, fully takes over Ukraine and it gets into guerrilla fighting, like, could we find that reason to be like, hey, maybe we can go in there, or kind of have our own essential like excuse, like Russia did with, like Putin did with Georgia, of like, oh shit, like they blew up this small little Polish NATO tank right over here, and now we're going to go in. I'd be curious to hear what anyone thinks.
Well, Mike, I want to throw the question back at you. Do you think they're a paper tiger? I'd like to hear your opinion on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I gotta say, like, I'm just sort of surprised. I've always kind of viewed. Granted, don't do as much research as you guys do in the military aspect of it, but I was kind of surprised that I've always sort of viewed, the Russian military maybe not as much an equal to us, as possible. I would put China, even closer, of course. But yeah, but I gotta say, like, I'm kind of really surprised in terms of how this is like started and been implemented so far. Brent said, hey, we even suffered like logistics issues and whatnot. But the thing that comes up in my mind is like from the movie Black Hawk Down, like, oh, those Delta Force guys are going in there. It's like, oh, it's going to be real quick. You don't even need to like bring your shit with you. Like, we're going to be in and out. And like, that's the biggest no-no. Like, you prepare for the worst. And it doesn't seem like the Russian military did that, unless you're saying like, oh, this is more of a prodding kind of movement. But that's pretty shitty. Just like throw guys as lemmings.
It's such a good point, Michael, in terms of paper tiger. I'm like you. I think that Russia's got a fantastic, capable military when maintained. But there's a couple weaknesses when it comes to Russia that the United States doesn't have to deal with. Russia has a rather small economy. All of Russia's economy is about the size of that of Texas. I say this every stream. Texas is but one state in the U.S. economy, and it is not the largest economy in the United States. So keep that in perspective. Now, that being said, Germany is also about the size of Texas, landmass wise, and we know what they were able to do during World War II. There's literally pictures of German tanks parked outside Moscow, and you can see Moscow in the background. Okay, fair enough. So let's keep things in perspective. That doesn't mean that they're a paper tiger simply because they're economically small, but it means that their window to attack countries is rather small, because eventually that economy catches up with them. And if you notice, that's the first thing that we're attacking here. We are attacking their economy. We're starting to lock down their banks, and this is having a direct impact on them already. I was on Facebook today. I'm part of a Russian reenactors group, and we have a couple of contacts inside Russia that ship stuff, some that's handmade reproduction, some that's original World War II stuff. You want to buy a reproduction Russian fur hat? This is the guy to go to. And they're asking, hey, can we even get stuff from you anymore? And he's like, no, don't place your orders right now because we're having banking problems. This is affecting everybody. This guy has no bone in the fight militaristically whatsoever. He just sells fur hats, but it's impacting his ability to ship stuff here. So it is impacting everyone on some scale or another. And then secondly, when you do that, and those people that are normal businessmen, or maybe they're people that they're importing food, whatever the case may be, this will have a real impact on the people of Russia. And the people of Russia can begin to turn against the government of Russia when you start going hungry, when your cell phone towers go down, whatever the case may be. All this other technology and these goods that you're importing from other countries, all of a sudden that's locked down. Fuel cells, that's a big part of it. Which we've already talked about. And I'm going to turn this one more direction. I'll hand it over to you guys. When you guys are asking, like, what can we do sort of without putting boots on the ground? There's a ton we can do. We've just got to be willing to do it. We can cyber attack, like Chad mentioned. Don't be afraid to cyber attack. Sure, they'll counter cyber attack. Hey, it's a test on our system. Let's see what we've got. Okay, do we have the fortitude to fix this and get through it? And can we do it quicker than they can or not? You can't let a country that you're almost at war with through proxy like Russia say, don't cyber attack us or we'll cyber attack you, and then back down. No, you cyber attack each other, and then you see who's the biggest boy on the planet and who can get through it. And I guarantee you, we here in the United States have better cyber technology and capabilities and backup plans than some country like Russia. Secondly, drones. I love drones. People ask me, name something Obama did right. Drone strikes. He drone strike the shit out of some people. And I'm going to tell you, there's no reason we shouldn't have 4,000 drones circling Kyiv right now, droning any Russian vehicle anywhere it is without question. Now, we're not going to have American flags painted on those drones, but I guarantee you, we've got some people here in this country with a stencil and a can of spray paint that can put something else on there.
Just
Whether
says
it's
not American on it.
a Sudanese flag, it can be a Wolverine's flag. We don't care. All right. Drone.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, we don't listen. It's in every war, Michael, and you know it. We can do the same thing here, right? You just put somebody else's insignia on there and you drone strike the holy shit out of them. And when one of them finally gets shot down, you go, holy crap, those Ukrainians had some really good drone technology, almost as good as ours.
I would posit this forth about whether Russia's a paper tiger or not. Are we looking at them through the wrong lens? I remember when Desert Storm was over, Commandant Gray made the statement that the big outcome of this war would be is the United States just proved it could do everything it says it can do when no other military in the world could. Maybe we're looking at the Russians in the wrong way. We're just looking at them for things we think should be there that just aren't there, like capabilities they never intended to have. You know, we're thinking the way we think he should have been in Kiev in 2 days. I mean, if this was a U.S. invasion, the 82nd would have dropped on Kiev. First Armored would have drove in and surrounded. The Marines would have surged out of Crimea, and we'd be in all the big cities. Maybe Vlad said, take a week to get there.
Yeah, well, they have a different doctrine. There's no question about it. And people that just assume that, oh, they're going to follow the U.S. Army's airland battle doctrine, well, they don't. And they have their own. I would also say to the people who say, well, why didn't they take out the telephone systems and the electrical power systems right away? Once again, it may very well be that that's an indicator that they, number one, were overconfident, and number two, thought that they would take Ukraine intact and be received as liberators. And so why would you want to put the country that you want and want to liberate, why would you want to send it to the Stone Age? So there's issues like this. If I can take that and kind of transition it to a question for the group, and someone asked me this yesterday morning, and it kind of made my spine stiffen a little bit. They asked this: what happens if Russia loses? What happens?
Like the Winter War.
What happens to Russian prestige? The last time Russia shrank, we were given wars like Chechnya. You know, really ugly crap. Jesus Christ.
Perfect.
I believe it. I believe it.
It's called the creditor, not the predator.
No,
Yeah.
That's me right now. So, and so I want to put that question to the panel. Seriously, give it just a moment of thought and says, what's the danger if Russia doesn't win?
Well, I did hear this. I did hear this, Doc. I heard they were talking about on a mainstream news today is that, you know, when you paint Russia into a corner, like they may be painting themselves into, you have to give them a way out. So what is the way out that we're going to give them? I don't have that answer, but they do have to have a way out, a way to get out of this. And I don't know what it is. Because right now, if they were to agree to everything that we're asking for and everything Ukraine's asking for and say, we're going to turn our tanks around and we're going to go out and we're going to get out of your country, that's an utter defeat for Russia. And they would never do that. That's not an option. So what is the option? I don't have the answer.
I don't see how can they win this at this point? I mean, look at what's going on, guys. Like, you got whole cities like with thousands of people preparing for counterattack. Like this whole invasion, in my opinion, was based off this preface that they were going to be greeted as heroes. Right now, it looks like damn near the whole country is rising up against them. Like, how do you install a puppet government under these conditions? Like, I don't see how they win.
What a miscalculation.
Even if they take the city of Kyiv, what then? You're going to put a president over a bunch of disgruntled people? That guy ain't going to last very long.
No, Doc was absolutely correct. Doctrinally, the Russians are out of their element. They are a conventional fighting force. They have been largely since World War II. This limited war, Brent, you're absolutely correct. They're trying to fight a limited war. They haven't historically been successful at that at all. They are completely out of their element here, and I think we're seeing the repercussions of that.
Yeah, somebody advised Putin very, very badly. And I don't believe the whole, the story we keep hearing about like Putin's mental health is degrading and all that stuff. That is absolutely Western propaganda.
He is a KGB man. He is a KGB man. He is cold, calculated. He is not losing his freaking marbles. I doubt that's true.
I agree that that's totally fabricated, but can you imagine him turning on Western news and they're all questioning his mental capacity? How humiliating must that be?
I don't think he really cares too much about Western opinion, to be honest.
Right.
At least from I mean, there's a fine line between, being crazy and megalomania. Like he is a narcissist, like he is, he believes in his own grandeur and his leadership style and what he's going to bring back to Russia. Doc, so you had asked like, what if he loses? Now, what do you mean by lose? Are you just talking about like Ukraine, or are you talking about like further beyond?
So
that?
what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is this: that sometimes you make a deal with the devil. The stability is a good thing, Michael, and I think you agree with that. Political stability. This is one of the weird. This is one of the weird. What's the word I'm saying? Paradoxes of empires is that they bring peace. The Roman Empire, when it goes and it takes Germania, and when it takes, the Celts of Gaul and the Celts of, England and all this stuff, it's a violent takeover that is then followed by 120 years of peace. Generations of people experience peace. And they may not experience peace under the most representative government, but they experience peace. What I mean is, it is counterintuitive and counterproductive for an empire to have wars on its inside. And so when an empire collapses, you see just nothing but mayhem and infighting and Kosovo. And that's what ushered in the Bosnia-Serbia 4-year war. That was a genocide. This was the shrinking of the Soviet Union. What I'm asking is, oh my God, if Russia further shrinks, does Siberia go to a war against Mongolia? Really, what the hell happens here, guys? And are we willing to just sit back and go, damn, I don't know what to do because I'm like you. He's a megalomaniac. He's a narcissist. He's evil. I don't want to give him anything. But now I'm worried about the Russian people. And so if an empire implodes, we're going to see a lot of ugliness.
Yeah. So I was going to save that for kind of my closing statements because I know we're kind of getting closer. But I think the difference here is, or what I think will happen is, like in the first Gulf War that Les mentioned, right? The reason why we didn't take out Saddam Hussein is because he was like there as a buffer against Iran, right? And that's why we didn't go all the way. We just wanted to kick him out of Kuwait so we could, get the oil and whatnot. And of course, we saw what happened the second time, where once you remove that buffer, right? If we're just playing it from a purely Machiavellian point of view of, I don't care how he's treating his people or this and that, this person's here because for right now it serves our interests. Then that the difference there is that one. Obviously it was a buffer, but it was an outside force that initiated it. It wasn't something that was done internally by the Iraqis. Mm-hmm. What I think could happen here, and sadly I think a lot of lives are going to get lost, but is that with these harsh economic sanctions that have just come to date so far, the EU shutting off their airspace to Russian-owned planes, is that we're seeing protests already within the on the Russian side. Granted, there's millions and millions of people. It's not like there's a small representation, so we don't know quite necessarily how many Russians feel that way. But as these sanctions go longer and longer, and no one's able to trade, no one's able to earn money, then you're going to see that grow, and there's going to be more protests, and then you're going to see Putin really try to struggle and hold on to power. And at some point, it's going to flip, just like USSR did in Yeltsin, or excuse me, before Yeltsin. Am I right? Who was it?
Gorbachev.
Gorbachev. Thank you. And the fall of the USSR. So if it happens where it's purely internal, obviously by outside economic forces, then I think that there's a good thing there. But if it's an outside force coming in, then that fits into his whole dialogue of, hey, I'm trying to defend the fatherland here, and these Western forces are trying to take us down. So
maybe it's the end of the oligarchy, is what you're saying.
Yeah, hopefully. But sadly, the people that suffer the most, like you typically see in embargoes, isn't the rich. Although this time it's pretty severe. It's the regular folk that get hurt, and that's the only thing that sucks about the whole thing.
There's another point to that too. If you look in the aftermath of the Falklands War, the junta was brought down in Argentina and replaced with a democratic government. So you can go the other extreme too. It doesn't have to go to being a shit show.
I'm sorry. Explain that further. I didn't get the reference. I'm sorry. You're talking about
after the end of the Falklands War, when the British defeated the Argentines in the Falklands and they had to go home, the junta that was unpopular but had become very popular for regaining this land that was very important to the Argentine people, quickly fell out of favor, and the whole era of military juntas running Argentina and having their dirty war, within a year that all came to end, and they had democratically elected presidents. They had a legislature representative of the people, and so far that's held. So it can go the other way. And to recycle back to an earlier question, how does this end for Russia? If you follow the historical precedent, this could follow the path of the Winter War. The Finns held out for 3 months and then made peace with the Russians. And the Russians just basically declared, we got everything we were after, which is basically what they did, what they demanded before the war started. They did get all that, and they just called peace and went back, and didn't tell anybody about 1 million casualties. So that's what, if Putin, we're not exactly sure what Putin wants. That was what the whole last live stream was about. If it was like my theory that he needs a land route to Crimea so he can make advantage of that port, as soon as he gets it, he might call it good and save face.
I have to answer the question. Giving him an out would probably appeal to his ego. I think it's got to be something that he can point to and say, look, Russian people, this is why I need to be your president for another 10 years or 20 years. But I've got an article up right now. This is a Russian news source. There are protesters in Moscow anyway. I mean, this is not looking good for him. This is kind of politically backfiring. So in the end, he's going to have to answer to his people. And I think giving him an out that he can at least point to and save face and still project the typical stereotypical Russian strength that he wants to project, I think that would probably work out best. I don't know what that is. Like everybody else, I'm just as clueless. I know they met on Belarus. The Ukrainians and Russians met on Belarus today, and it's still unclear what he really wants. So, but giving him an out is the only way this is going to end. Or it's going to end like it did in Chechnya with the leveling of Ukraine with artillery, the leveling of cities, etc.
There is one out. There's one out that Ukraine doesn't lose anything tangible, any of its sovereignty, like its tangible sovereignty. There is one out, and that is for Zelensky to say, yeah, okay, we promise it will never, ever, never, 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 ever, never happen. We're not joining NATO.
Well, they did that though with the EU thing. They were kind of pressured by Russia not to join the EU because they were considering it.
I can tell you right now that that's not going to happen.
Military. EU is not military.
I know the EU is not military. I know that, but Ukraine is smart enough to know that before the two, you joined the civilian organization before the military one. So even just by joining the civilian one, it was already like an instant, like a catalyst for Russia.
I agree, Michael. And I think it was just today or yesterday, they signed some letter requesting that they become immediately part of the EU. And that is a shadow of a step to becoming part of the UN. It's very obvious that they've put that line in the sand, and that the leader of Ukraine has decided that that's where he's going to put his eggs in that basket, and then put the ball in the court of the EU of saying, hey, we're asking to do this. Now you have to tell us that we can.
All right, guys. Hey, we got 10 mics till 2-hour mark, so I do want to start wrapping this up. What I'm going to ask is that we're going to go around the horn. We'll go clockwise, so I'll be starting with Michael. And just final thoughts about this whole thing. Anything you want to say about the situation, and then finally, how do you see this ending? So, not to go down to take 2 hours for a wrap up, but if you can try to sum it up in a couple minutes, I appreciate it. So, starting with Michael, take it, bud.
Yeah. First off, thank you, Brent, and everyone for having me on the channel. I have enjoyed this thoroughly. Really, kind of like what I said before, is that I think the economic sanctions and everything that's going on from the EU, the US, the UK, I think that's going to have a profound impact, long term, depending on how much Putin wants to keep going down this route. But like I said, it's early. All I can hope is that the Ukrainians keep fighting, that we find a way of supporting them without everything further blowing up there. And, I just also pray for the Russian people, give them strength to weather this, and hope for all the best. Thank you.
Sanctions are good. I think it's a good place to start. Economic warfare has been successful in the past. And Russia having such a small economy, it will impact them immensely. Lethal aid is better. I think Ukraine is going to hold, if no one's going to go in physically and help, the best strategy for Ukraine is to protract the war. And that's guerrilla warfare. That's insurgency. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Russia's not faring well. Their troops don't seem to be motivated, at least from what we can see in Western media. I know it's kind of one-sided in Western media, but I'm not seeing indicators that the Russian troops are motivated to win this fight. Again, they're fighting for their leader's ego. Ukraine is fighting to exist. There's a lot more motivation for the common Ukrainian to resist than there is for the Russian soldier to continue to advance. I also want to say China's watching. We have an economic interest in Taiwan. I'm not sure we're really going to sit back and watch Taiwan fall. Taiwan produces 80% of the world's computer microchips. That's huge. We don't want that to fall to the Communist Party of China. But they're watching. So whatever we do, it needs to be, we need to project strength. And we need to indicate to China that we're not going to tolerate any incursion in Taiwan, and project that from a position of strength.
All right, so I'll say a couple of things. First of all, if Russia were to attack something like Kyiv or any of the other large cities that are out there, Kharkov, etc., with an attack like we saw in Chechnya, for example, of just indiscriminately shelling an urban area, I think that would be a bit of a game changer. I think you want to get the West more involved. I'm not going to say EU. I'm not going to say UN. I'm just going to say the West more involved. That's exactly how you do it. So I'm not sure that would be the calculation that Putin should make, is shelling a large urban city like that. And that may be what he's dealing with right now. I don't think that would be the right choice for him. I think it would get the West more involved. It would give us more images to put on TV, which would get more American and Western support behind our militaries to go in and support Ukraine. Maybe not boots on the ground, but definitely with a more aggressive military style response. I'll just end it on this. Look, for the Russian people and the Ukrainian people, we pray for all of them. We're not talking about the military complex here. We're talking about the women, the children, those people that are just tied up in this and don't have any view on it one way or the other. I hate to see any time that women and kids are hurt in warfare or any other time. And I hate to see that now. So let's hope that we can come to a peaceful resolution fairly quickly, and we can minimize those casualties on the civilian front.
Okay, I'm going to echo Bruce's words there. I think we need to take a moment here and just recognize the tragedy that this is, right? It's a tragedy, of course, for the Ukrainian people. The Russian people are losing their sons. So it's a tragedy for them. And frankly, it's a human tragedy for the rest of the world as we watch this just horrible man-made catastrophe. So there's that. Secondly, my predictions as I started this live stream tonight is admitting that I didn't do due diligence in my forecast. My analysis was off, and I did not think we'd get to this point. Clearly, we are. And so any forecasts I can give you from this point, I think I need to back up and regroup. I just don't think that I can give you an accurate what's going to happen next. Here's what I can hope happens next. Regardless of the outcome in Ukraine, meaning a Russian victory or a Russian defeat, what I hope is that the Russian people take this opportunity to institute political change, meaningful political change that benefits the Russian people. And that, of course, is going to be being a good global partner with their neighbors. So, and in fact, with the whole entire world. That's what I hope comes out of this. And when we say China's watching, we are absolutely correct. If that is the end result, that there is meaningful, positive change in governance after this Ukrainian disaster, then maybe the Marxists in China will take that to heart and say, whoa, that can happen here too. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but if we can play a retroactive game and I can say what should have happened was that there should have been sex robots all throughout Russia and all throughout Ukraine, and because with a Skynet, the sex robots would have done all the fighting for us. That's pretty much it.
Wow, having to follow sex robots. Okay. We'll talk about raising the bar there, Doc. I'm going to follow on what Chad said about China. Part of what we do here, we have to be sending a message to China, and that's why I'll stand by my earlier comments in the stream. We should be having an airlift going on there that makes the original Berlin airlift look like a training exercise. We should be pumping all kinds of gear. Out in the desert, we have things parked. Let's give the Ukrainians some F-16s. Let's give them some old M1s. Let them have those. They need more than rifles. And the Javelin factory should be working 3 shifts a day. If not, I'll be highly disappointed. But we need to do this to send a message to the Chinese. If we'll do this for the Ukrainians, we'll do it for the Taiwanese. And maybe just to ram the point home, maybe an Air Force wing and a Marine brigade need to go do a training exercise in Taiwan in the next week or so.
All right, guys, this has been an outstanding stream. We've held like 470 something viewers in here for the majority of this. I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. My forecast, so I don't really see a good end result for Russia out of this. I think Putin was advised that the majority of the people would welcome them and cheer them as liberators, like what happened for us in Iraq. When we first went in, and that absolutely is not the case. So the only way I see this ending, and I could be wrong. I didn't think Russia was going to push in, and they did. So, but my hypothesis here is that they're going to surround Kyiv. They're going to mass their forces. They're going to do what we did in Fallujah and give the people of Kyiv 48 hours to get the hell out, if you want to live, but you got to come through our checkpoint. So we know you're not a fighter. And then they're just going to freaking lay waste. And that's going to be their regime change. And then they're going to pull back and they're going to reoccupy those areas that they took, maybe a little bit more. And then they're going to go firm. And then that would be their win. They successfully did their regime change. Or at least the current regime, and now they're pulling back and they're reinforcing their already taken lines. So that's the only thing I could see Russia gaining out of this is if they accomplish that. There's no way they could win this projected war lasting for a long time. I mean, if you've guys seen Red Dawn, yeah, it's a movie, but this is 100% what's going on in Ukraine. At least what's going to happen if they continue to stay. So that's my 2 cents, guys. I don't see this ending well for Russia. I mean, it's not going to end well for anybody, and we just need to keep China in the rearview mirror. Okay, China would want nothing more than for NATO and the United States to engage in an all-out war with each other. Because who's the winner in that? China. We just destroy each other, and China becomes stronger. So that's my 2 cents, guys. Unless anybody has any saved rounds, we're going to go ahead and close this out. We're just over 2 hours tonight. This has been a great stream. Any saved rounds?
Fuck Trudeau.
Go Ukraine.
All right, guys.
Wolverines!
Have a good night.